Hello, my name's Julian Edgar and I'm the author of this book, Designing and Building a New Energy Efficient Home. What I want to cover in today's video is energy efficient home design and curtains, curtain choices. The way you go about choosing curtains and installing them can make a radical difference to the energy efficiency of a home, and yet it is almost never mentioned. Let's take a look. So you want to build a passive solar house in southern Australia? Curtain choices have got to be high on your list of interior priorities. I'm not talking here about the aesthetic choices, you can work that out with your partner. I'm talking here about the energy choices. And I can't overemphasize this enough. Curtains are really important to the energy efficiency of homes. But energy experts almost never talk about curtains. What they talk about is window U and SHGC values. So what are these things? Well, U values is how much heat gets through the window and frame, basically. So how much heat gets conducted through the frame, gets conducted through the glass. Or, that's if it's hot outside, but if it's hot inside, how much heat gets conducted the other way, through the glass and through the frame. You don't want heat transfer through there. You're trying to keep the interior of your house cool, or you're trying to keep the interior of your house warm, depending on the season. The other parameter that's related to windows is solar heat gain coefficient, SHGC, which is basically how much sunshine can get in through the glass. Glass absorbs a bit of the sunshine, how much makes it all the way through. Obviously in winter when you particularly want that sunshine coming in to warm your house. But what's all that got to do with curtains? Well, curtains can affect both the U and the SHGC values, and they can affect them in a really good way. Now let's imagine you're designing your house. You've got to 7 stars in the NADAS modelling. That's fine. Now, how can you go better? How can you get your house to perform even better without spending a lot of money? Curtains are one example. You don't need to then go to even higher level windows in terms of U and SHGC, because you can use curtains to achieve the same thing, but at a much, much lower cost. So let's start off with U values. How can U values be improved by curtains? Well, let's take winter. It's warm inside your house, it's cold outside, and you want to stop heat loss through the windows. Remember, even good windows are just like big holes in walls. They just let heat in and out so easily compared with an insulated wall. So when selecting curtains, it'll be closed at night. That's when it's coldest. That's when you want to keep the heat in the most. Firstly, select thick curtains. Now, thick curtains will be heavy curtains. So the other way of looking at it is to say thick and heavy curtains. So when you pick up the curtain, how much does it weigh per linear metre? You want it to weigh a lot, because that means there'll be a lot of material there, and a lot of material will be better at blocking heat transfer. You also want the curtains to be dense. When you hold up a sample to the light and look through it, you don't want to see any gaps. It wants to be a block-out curtain, because a block-out curtain is more densely woven, doesn't have the holes to let the air through. When you install the curtain, you want the bottom to be touching the floor, because if there's a gap there, the air, the warm air from inside your house can go in up underneath and then shed the heat through the glass. We want to stop that air getting under the curtain and up near the glass. And by the same token, and even more importantly, we want a pelmet across the top of the curtain to stop any heat going up and past the top of the curtain. If you have a gap at the top, you have a gap at the bottom, there'll be a convection current of air. Will go round and round, happily exchanging your room's heat with the outside through the glass. And we don't want that convection current occurring. You also want the edges of the curtain to preferably be sealed to the walls. Now that's not as important as the gaps at the top and the bottom, because the convection currents will go vertically. But if you can seal the edges of the curtain to the walls, then there's no air gaps at the ends as well. Now, you can achieve that if you've got fairly dense curtains of the sort we're talking about, and they're mounted fairly close to the wall. The folds will be against the walls anyway, and that's what we've done in our house. We don't have any Velcro or anything like that, magnetic studs or anything like that, but the curtain is touching the wall each side of the window. So it's not complicated. Thick curtains, no gap at the top, no gap at the bottom, and no gap at the sides. Now, this will reduce heat transfer through the window quite substantially, and yet compared with buying higher quality, lower U value windows, this is so cheap. More expensive windows can cost you $50,000 in a blink of an eye. Curtains of this sort, we might be talking about $500 for that window, not $50,000. So obviously you've got to shut them at night. Well, you'd do that anyway, and that will reduce heat loss. How much heat loss? This is where it gets tricky. There's almost no research that I can find, no technical papers on this that I can find that actually quantifies the improvement in the behaviour of windows with thick curtains installed in the manner that I've described. But my guess is probably something of the order of a third better. That's a lot. That's a lot if you're not paying a huge amount. I'll know more after the next winter. We've not yet experienced winter in our house. I want to be able to shut the curtains on some of the windows, leave the other curtains open, and on a cold night go outside and aim my thermal camera at the open window, the window with no curtains, and the window with closed curtains, and see what the temperature difference is. But I am sure there will be a very substantial drop in heat transmission. 30% is just my guess. So what curtains did we go for? Well, I looked and I looked and I looked to try to find the best dense, closely woven, heavy curtains. And I got lots of curtain retailers online to send me samples, and their heaviest curtain material was just so light and thin, it was hopeless. And then we started looking, okay, what's a place that sells a lot of curtains? You can buy them in bulk, and maybe we can put two together. We can sew the top of the two curtains together at the top, and they'll hang together, and we'll get a double layer. And the ones we're using are IKEA, and I don't know how to pronounce that, Anacasia, something like that. Anyway, they're block-out curtains. They're available in different colours. Here are the ones that we're using. And they're a pair of them sewn together at the top and on a roller track, because they are quite heavy by the time you have two of them together. And you can see there the pelmet at the top. Now I just made that pelmet from pre-primed pine, just screwed it together and filled the holes. Very cheap, very easy. It mounts to the wall. In fact, it mounts to the architrave with brackets, and the curtain track actually is attached to the inside of the top of the pelmet. Very effective at blocking heat transfer. I think it looks fine. It was easy, and it also provides the curtain rail mount. So we are using lots of those curtains, bought dozens of packets of them, but still when you compare it to the cost of more expensive windows, very, very cheap. Now this is when the house is still being built, so you can see some cement and all sorts of things lying around. Also note next to it, we have some different curtains, which I'm going to be covering very, very shortly. But those IKEA curtains, they're recycled polyester. The only negative I've come across so far is they vent quite a lot of volatile organic compounds, VOCs, when they're new. And we're monitoring VOC levels in the house. And especially if you have that door open and that sliding door and the air is blowing through the curtains, the VOC goes very, very high, very fast. That will reduce as they outgas and lose that, but recycled polyester, they do have a lot of VOCs, and that's the only negative I have found so far. In terms of cost, excellent. In terms of density, excellent. In terms of, I think, insulative values, very good. And anecdotally, for reasons I won't bother going into, we actually used one of those curtains as a rug on a bed, and it was so warm, had an emergency, needed a rug, used one of those curtains. It was so warm, and I thought, okay, well, if it's holding in humans' heat as well as this, it's certainly going to be holding in house heat as well. So reducing the U values of the window substantially just means shutting those curtains at night when you don't want that heat loss. As easy as that. What about reducing solar heat gain coefficient values, SHGC? And when would you want to do that? Well, take summer. You've got your block-out curtains open, but you've got then an open area of glass, nothing over the top of it. The sun's not shining on the glass, because we've got an eave that shades it in summer. We don't want direct sunshine on the glass, do we? But you still get a lot of indirect radiant heat, so reflections off the ground, things of that sort. And what you can do with a curtain to reduce the SHGC value is you can shut it in daytime. Now, you don't want a block-out curtain because you don't want to block out all your view and your light. You want a sheer net curtain. So you shut them in daytime to reduce heat gain. How much improvement, how much reduction in heat gain? Again, I would estimate 20 to 30%, depending on how densely you arrange those curtains. So let's look at that in more detail. This has got a lot of information on it, this slide. So firstly, over here, there are the winter block-out curtains to reduce the U value of the window. And next to it, we actually have the net curtains shut, and you can see straight through to our lack of landscaping. These curtains don't block out the view. You can see straight through them. They are sheer curtains. Now, we are using, again from IKEA Lille. And I was just looking up before the video to make sure I got the name right. And I see here in Australia, they're $8, $8 for a pair of them. Cheap as. Now, the sheer curtains, because they're white, when they're drawn across, they tend to reflect radiant heat. And you can actually see that if we measure the amount of radiant heat getting through an uncurtained window and then a curtained window with the IKEA Lille sheer curtains. So here I've got my black bulb temperature measuring device, black bulb thermometer. On the left, 26 degrees is the radiant heat coming in through that uncurtained window, 26.1. Pull across the sheer curtain and the radiant heat drops to 24.9. So it drops over a degree. Now, I'll come back to that in a minute. You can see, though, it's not just my making it up. You can actually see that the measurement shows a reduction in radiant heat gain through that window. And over here, I've got a thermal camera image, and these vertical lines, not all of them because some are artifacts of the camera, but a lot of these vertical lines are the folds in the sheer curtain. And you can see here, it's where the sheer curtain is stretched apart a bit. The hotter the colour, the higher the temperature is being measured. Now, after I looked at this, you could see it was certainly working in reducing heat gain. But I went back to these and I thought, okay, I'm actually going to double the curtains. So over here we have only one Lille IKEA curtain stretched out fairly wide. I actually added, because they're so cheap, add as many as you want. I added another curtain pair to this window. So the folds are a bit denser. And when you actually measure it with the thermal camera, you can see that the denser folds are actually reducing the amount of heat gain even further. Now, how dense you make your sheer curtains is entirely up to you. The denser they are, the less heat that comes in, but the harder it is to see out. I found that doubling this one over here was a nice happy medium. You could still see out easily enough, but it definitely reduced the heat gain. So reducing solar heat gain coefficient values is as simple as adding sheer white curtains. And that's really, really important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's such a cheap way of improving the Windows SHGC performance, actually reducing the heat gain when you don't want it. And that key point, when you don't want it, you can have these curtains always closed in summer, the sheer curtains, and then you can open them in winter. So you can get much better solar heat gain effective coefficient in winter when you want that sun coming in, and yet block it out, or even the indirect heat, block it out in summer when you don't want it coming in. And I'm quite confident that those curtains have improved the performance of the house measurably. The house is doing better than its NATA's modelling indicated it would, especially in summer, and I think the presence of those sheer curtains is part of that better performance. So curtains, they're easy, they're cheap, and they can make a real difference. And you can do your own aesthetic choices. You can get those IKEA ones, for example, in different colours. They don't have to be dark. You can have all sorts of different lace or sheer curtains with patterns or plain or whatever. I don't think it's going to matter a great deal, so long as there's plenty of white material there to reflect the heat. But the really important point is this is a very low cost way of improving window performance compared to buying much more expensive windows, much higher quality windows, and you have control. You can decide, okay, I'm going to open the sheer curtains because we want a bit more sunshine coming in. I'm going to close them today. We don't want that sunshine coming in. We can close those curtains in winter at night to trap the heat inside. They're under your control, and you can change them depending on personal preference, the weather, and so on. The book is called, there it is, Designing and Building a New Energy Efficient Home, your own cost-effective passive solar home in southern Australia or in any other similar climate with cool winters and hot summers. The book will be out mid-late 2026. I'm going to wait until I've got a full year of logging. I've got summer logging, I've got spring logging. We're partway through autumn. I definitely want that winter logging to do things like take that photo, that thermal camera photo with some of those windows curtained and some of them uncurtained, and see the difference in heat that's escaping through the window. But remember, curtains are really important in terms of the energy efficiency of your home. Thank you.